How are you today?
I'm doing okay. I've been kind of thinking about an issue that's been on my mind for about a month or so.
Okay. Well, what does that look like for you? What's that issue?
Well, it's somewhat complicated, but I'll kind of walk you through all the details. My son is about a year and a half right now.
Okay.
His biological father has since moved to South Korea and has a brand new family in South Korea. And he hasn't physically been a parent for my son since he was about a year and just a couple of months. And that's when he left to South Korea to pursue a teaching career.
Okay.
It was a challenging decision because I at least had someone who could help watch my little guy.
Yeah.
And that kind of lifted some responsibility and some burdens. And now the issue I don't think is necessarily raising him on my own, which I'm doing now. The issue is really that his biological father wants to keep in contact with him.
He does.
Yes. And the only way that he can do that from a completely different country is through Skype sessions.
Okay.
And initially I was you know, I wasn't necessarily excited, but I wasn't angry, and you know, I didn't have any ill feelings about the idea.
Okay.
But it's been a couple of months now since we've done it. We will do a Skype session every other week just to accommodate our schedule. And I thought it would be a great idea for my son Enzo to see his biological father.
Okay.
But I've noticed that during the sessions that because his father left him at such a young age, he doesn't have a physical recollection of him. So when he sees him on the computer screen, there isn't that connection that he's making to a memory.
Right.
He's basically just it seems almost like he's watching a cartoon. He's seeing this random man hold, you know, a stuffed animal or a toy, read a book to him. And I know that his father is attempting to connect with him because that's what he wants.
Right.
But I'm not quite seeing the value in it.
So just to interrupt you really quickly, I just want to I feel like a good foundation of the story here, and so I just want to make sure I'm collecting all the pieces here. So you said your son is a year and a half? Okay, and his father moved out of the country when he was about a year? Is that correct?
Yeah,
About
about that time.
Okay, so it's only been the last several months that he's been trying to connect with Enzo?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
All right, and so just being on Skype, that's really the only way that he's been connecting?
Yeah, I mean, he'll attempt to, you know, send random packages, but for
For a
a little guy,
Yeah.
You might tell him that, hey, this came from your father, but unless he sees the person handing it to him, he's not making the connection.
Right.
And I guess my struggle is that now I have to basically persuade my son with candy or gifts of some sort, and say, if you sit in front of this screen for 10 minutes and talk to this person, because he doesn't even recognize that it's his father. He doesn't know who it is. He doesn't say, hey, hi, Daddy. And so I'm having some trouble because not only am I having to kind of manipulate the situation and manipulate his behavior, but now I'm also getting the other flack from him. I'm sorry, my ex-husband, his name is Jimmy. I'm getting flack from Jimmy because he's saying, well, you're not preparing him for this session. Are you planting ideas in his head? Or, you know, he's making me seem like the bad guy who doesn't want this to happen.
Right.
And I'm trying my best to keep an open mind, but I'm having trouble because it's not a very natural process where my son is anxious and excited to see his father. And
instead, it's kind of like he doesn't really know who this person is.
no, I mean, I'll just, I'll look at my calendar or my watch and say, okay, it's Wednesday at 6. Let's go ahead and turn on the computer screen
Okay.
because it's time to talk to
Yeah.
this man. And I wish I could say that he's talking to his dad. But if he sees this person and doesn't even have an emotional reaction,
Yeah.
then I begin to question whether or not it's helpful at all.
Okay.
Or whether or not he's going to get confused if we continue with the Skype sessions. And if we do, and he gets older,
Yeah.
he's going to ask questions, and I'm going to have to explain these very difficult decisions that he and his father and I have had to make
Yeah.
in his life. And
Absolutely.
so I'm really, I guess, struggling with the decision because I don't want to take my son away from his biological father.
Right.
But it's kind of, I think to myself that it was a choice that his father made. It was a choice that he made to physically leave his son. And
And now the choice is continuing with these Skype sessions or stopping these Skype sessions.
yeah,
Okay.
and in a way, I think that I would be falsely, I would provide some false hope that it would actually help them bond when I don't think it's going to help.
You don't think it's going to?
I don't think so.
Okay.
At
So
this point.
when you first started these Skype sessions, it kind of sounded like you did have some optimism for it a little bit, or you
Yeah.
were okay with it at the very least.
I think
That's changed.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think what was driving me was this guilt that that not only does this little guy not have, an intact family, but he
Right.
doesn't have a father, and so
Okay.
I needed to at least give it a shot because I knew that he needed a father, and I didn't think that I was enough. That as a mom, I can only do so much,
Yeah.
and it's something that that's one aspect of this decision that has made it difficult because I don't want to hurt him more than I think he's hurting. But I don't know. He's so young, and
Yeah. Absolutely.
it's a lot to think about.
Okay. So I want to kind of slow it down a little bit. Tell me how you're feeling right now.
Really vulnerable.
Okay.
Still feeling the pain of things that are out of my control. I'm feeling a little bit, well, actually a lot, a lot of guilt.
Okay.
That that I'm hurting my son more than he's already hurting.
Okay. And describe to me hurting. Describe to me what that looks like for him. Or how you feel like that's happening to him.
Right. Actually, I think now that you've mentioned it, I mean, I don't see him crying for his father. I don't see him asking about his father. He's a perfectly normal little boy. And I guess I'm perhaps projecting this guilt that he doesn't have a father like most other children. And he may very well be just fine.
Yeah.
And I guess I need to recognize perhaps that he is fine, and maybe I'm overthinking things. Maybe it has to do with me not having a real father figure in my life, and the understanding that I really wish that I had
Okay.
a strong father figure who's present, and how it's influenced me. And I guess I just want to make sure that it doesn't happen to my son.
So you want to make sure that Enzo has the things that maybe you didn't in a parent?
Yeah.
And what are those things?
I think that a single parent is just fine.
Yeah.
I need to say that again and again to myself, that he'll be just fine. That if I'm present with him, that I build a strong foundation with him, and that I share my emotions with him, unlike, what I grew up with,
Okay.
where I didn't see my parents expose how they felt on a daily basis. That I think that those qualities are going to provide, a great foundation for him. It just hurts me to know that he's kind of caught in the crossfire,
Yeah. Absolutely.
and that he didn't do anything to deserve this. And I just hope that when he gets older, that I can share some of these feelings with him.
And how, right now, he's a year and a half, so he's still very much in the baby stage, you know, just taking care of his basic needs and things like that. It sounds like you're doing a great job with that. So, as he grows up, as he's becoming a toddler and a young adult and all of those kind of things, like, how do you see yourself giving him these qualities that you've just mentioned of being stable and being supported and those kind of things? Because I know you're already thinking about it.
Yeah, I am. I know it'll be very important for me to build a reliable and strong support network. That it's not just me and him.
Yeah.
And for him to share in experiences with his cousins and his grandmother and his uncles, so he understands that families look a little bit different.
Yeah.
And our family might just be he and I for a while. And I know that it's going to be important to take care of myself, because as a full-time single parent who can't just shuffle him off every other weekend to an ex-husband, it's going to be really trying, because every moment of the day will be filled either with a job or taking care of him or spending time with him. So having that ability to balance my emotional state is going to be really important.
Yeah. And not just for him, for you.
Yeah.
Right? So how do you see yourself now and in the future taking care of yourself? What self-care do you see?
Well, I've tried to maintain the same, I guess, level of activity that I have before I got divorced.
Yeah.
So I'm still keeping in contact with my friends. I have an amazing group of colleagues who will often check in with me and
That's
make
wonderful.
sure that they can help in some way. And so I know that that's going to be important to maintain those relationships. And I still find great value in my career. And I know that whenever I interact with students, and I hear their story, and it kind of resonates with me and my story, and being a single parent, and when I hear about them, having strong ties with a grandparent or an aunt or an uncle who's taken them in because their parents were unavailable, it really gives me a sense of hope for the future, a sense that, you know, there are so many others in similar situations that I'm no different in many ways. And that's kind of helped me to figure things out.
You felt supported by that?
Yeah, just knowing that I could retain the same lifestyle that I did before, and that this transition doesn't have to affect every facet of my life, that I can retain a little bit of my identity from before the divorce.
Okay, wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, I'm so glad you have that insight. I feel like a lot of times, you know, with big life transitions, sometimes we can lose that a little bit. And it does seem like you have a really good insight into, you know, not only what your son needs, because that is incredibly important, but also what you need. And so you just even saying, you know, like him having contact with his aunts and uncles and his grandparents, but also you having contact with your support system and continuing to keep that. I just love hearing that you have those kind of connections. So that's wonderful. I do want to go back a little bit, rewind a little bit, and kind of go back to Jimmy a little. So I wanted to establish, and I'm glad that we have that, there is a separate life than Jimmy, right? So now that that has been established, where do you see him in your son's life? Because now I kind of want to explain what I'm thinking. So before, it was these Skype sessions, and it was bringing Enzo to him in this way, and now that doesn't seem to be working so much. And as you said before, there's some guilt there.
Yeah.
So with a possible decision of cutting that out, you know, what does that look like for you and your relationship with Enzo's father? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess you're asking me if, like, what role Jimmy is going to play in my life.
Exactly.
Now that I've thought about the Skype sessions. I think that I've, again, tried to keep an open mind.
Right.
I've told him through email numerous times that whenever he comes back into town, that he is welcome to come visit. And that when he's ready to be in his life again, that he's welcome to. I've never ever said that he couldn't see his son. And I guess as a result of that, I know that he will always be, I guess, a possible figure in our lives. But right now, he isn't indicating that he's going to be moving back to the United States. He already has a family in South Korea. He hasn't indicated that he's going to visit at all. He hasn't provided any financial support. So all those are signs to me that he's going to be a fairly distant figure. And I, again, besides just the Skype sessions, the occasional emails, checking in on him, I'm not getting the sense that he wants to be a part of his life. And I think I'm going through it emotionally, where I have to recognize that I can't force him to be the parent that I would want him to be. And so right now he's not really a part of my life. So I'm slowly letting go of the idea of him ever coming back. And I'm letting go of the idea that we'll ever co-parent, which in some ways I'm really grateful for. I guess it's kind of a hidden blessing. That I can raise him the way that I want to. I don't have to run any ideas by him. I have full legal and physical custody over him.
Right.
And I know that there will be times where I'll want some feedback, and I'll need that feedback. But right now, I really appreciate the fact that I have so much autonomy, so much independence, and it really makes me feel quite, I don't know if powerful is the right word, but it really empowers me to know that I'm going to try to make the best decision for him.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then I don't have to go through any hoops if there are any conflicts of interest that I'll just have to work through it on my own.
Yeah. And you feel comfortable with that you can work through it on your own.
You know, I've just, taken it one day at a time. Right now, I seem, I'm quite surprised, but it seems okay.
Yeah.
It seems like I think I could do it.
You can do it. And as you said before, aunts, uncles, grandma, grandpa, all of those kind of things that you have as a support also, just like Enzo does.
Yeah.
Does that feel right?
Yeah, I think, well, my family is down in the Bay Area. It's about an hour and a half drive. So it isn't as easy to say, you know what, I'm not feeling well, would you watch Enzo for a couple hours as I recuperate? So it's not that easy. But I know that if anything did happen, that I could ask for help, and they would be able to drive up with a little bit of notice in mind, so that they could help out. And so I like knowing that as a result of the divorce, that my family has been more present than ever and more willing to ask if I need help.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. 'Cause I think I've always presented myself as someone who could take care of everything and everyone, and now it's the tables have turned, and they're being very generous and caring, which is a bit surprising, but it's
a good
nice.
surprise.
Yeah, because again, I haven't grown up in a very, I would say, not a very loving environment. So the fact that they're sharing how they feel and sharing how they can help is really a new concept. So,
what do you think has changed?
Maybe it's because they finally see that I not that I've made mistakes, and I have made mistakes, but I think what's changed is they see that I'm not always in control, and I can't control things that are out of my hands, and maybe they see that even though I haven't asked them, but I think they've seen me more emotional than probably I've ever allowed myself to be.
Okay. So in a way, letting them in emotionally, that's been where they have been able to recognize that you've needed help.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Great. That's good to hear. Outside of your family, like in the Bay Area where you live, do you feel like you have support that's close by?
One of the first people that I contacted when I knew I was going to get a divorce were my two old middle school friends. And I remember them saying, just come on down. And they didn't ask me anything over the phone. And I just remember sitting in, her name is Judy's living room. And I was holding Enzo in my arms and sobbing. And it felt so good to be able to know that I could share with them.
Yeah.
And they just kind of sat there and listened, and that was that was what I needed.
Yeah.
Because I was so afraid of judgment. I was afraid of what they would think of me, because again, I always had everything kind of put together. I was put together. And it was nice to be able to know that I could just come and sob.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the first step for me to be able to get through this process.
Yeah.
I think the hardest part was accepting what people were going to think of me, because I was fearful of how I would share it and what people would think of me.
Yeah.
And
Not an easy thing.
No, not at all. Especially when you build that facade for so
Right.
long, that and everything kind of comes tumbling down. You don't know how to react. And so for me, it was a challenge to kind of figure out my next steps. But it was also knowing that they were free to judge if they wanted to, because I know that people do, and they will, despite your life.
Yeah.
And so the hardest part was just figuring out what the next steps were, and also sharing with people.
Yeah.
Like when you have a everyday conversation, you run into someone and they ask, "Hey, how's your husband doing?" And then tears come streaming down because you really don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
You really don't want to talk about the ugly stuff.
Right.
You want to kind of present yourself as this, flawless person.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're kind of winding down a little bit with our session. I wanted to check in again. How are you feeling right now?
I'm feeling really emotional, but good, because I think I'm realizing that I put a lot of pressure on myself unnecessarily, and that I'm good enough for my son.
Yeah, and he's good. Enzo's good.
He's amazing.
Yeah, he is.